Hello, everybody. This is Stephen Whitfield, drilling contractor here in Paris, France at the 2022 IADC World Drilling Conference. With me right now is Ram Murthi, Senior Manager of Controls and Automation at Nabors. Ram just gave a presentation on autonomous drilling, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So, Ram, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Stephen.
So, there's a lot that you spoke about, a lot of things that Nabors is kind of working on right now, so we'll just kind of get right to it. First thing that you kind of talked about was Nabors' rig operating system. You said that the rig operating system is critical for delivering safer, cleaner, faster wells. So I guess our viewers would probably want to know, like, what is the rig operating system? How does it work?
So rig operating system, that's really the brain of the drilling rig. So it's the engine that's basically driving what is needed for our customers. So our customers want something that's safe, want something that's clean, and want efficiency, which means they want wells to be drilled as fast as possible. So our rig operating system is basically the software that's providing all of this by providing the technologies that we've built in-house over these years. This journey began about 10 years ago. Our first step into this journey was to have the ability to automate machines to move from point A to point B. And then we started looking at technologies to be able to automate drilling processes, which means how are we going to drive efficiency by automating back to bottom processes or coming off bottom processes, or how do we incorporate some of the drilling best practices that have been pretty much in the minds of the company man or the tool pusher on the field. So the goal was to create an automation platform where we can take the best practices from one or two rigs and scale it across to 100 plus rigs in our fleet. So if you take one rig, there's always this question like, why is this rig outperforming another rig when everything else is the same? It's because either the rig crew is efficient in doing all these operations, or they're following standard best practices that the customer has told us. So we wanted to take that knowledge that's at the rig site in the driller's brains or the operator's brain and computerize it. So the platform basically computerizes those instructions, those best practices, those best recipes, and scale it across our fleet. So now rig A, rig B, or any rig across the globe can effectively have the same level of efficiency, consistency, and the performance that our customers want. So that's what the rig operating system is doing.
So interesting you bring up the recipes. One of the things that you mentioned in your presentation today was about this sort of need for balance between standardization and customization for your customers, and sort of how tricky that can be. So how do you kind of strike that balance? And why is it important that you have standardization and customization available?
Yeah, so standardization is more about the approach that you take for any process, right? Like so like the example that I gave about making a pizza, like you gotta have the basics. So when you take it to the drilling rig control system, you need to have an hoisting system, you need to have a rotary, you need to have flow. So you cannot go to drilling without all of this being present. So that being said, so that's where the standardization comes in. So you got to bring up your flow, we got to bring up your rotary, and you got to tag bottom, and then you start drilling. But how do you do this? Like over the years of deployment, we've seen our customers coming back to us and saying, hey, I don't like you putting the bit back on bottom at full rotary. That's because the tool is designed not to go back at full rotary parameters. So we started getting more of these customizable requests on the standard process of drilling. So how do you handle this at scale? So that's when the creation of recipe management happens. So we had to create a configurable ability to basically provide this for our customers without having to do re-engineering or redevelopment work. So we're looking at scaling this over 100 rigs, and it's impossible for us to have like 100 different versions of the same process deployed. So the way you do that is you abstract it from the standard process by having a configurability, and this configurability could be based on the tool that's deployed, based on the customer, based on the region that you go. So you could have a recipe for the Bakken, you can have a recipe for the Permian, you can have a recipe for the Middle East, Canada. I mean, that's so the flexibility of the system helps us with scaling the operations.
So you brought up a couple of case studies here at the conference. One of them was of your smart integrated suite in the Bakken. Could you tell us a little bit about that case study? What did you learn from it? What were some of the results?
Sure. So we partnered with one of our customers, and Bakken was pretty much the region where we deployed all of our solutions, the smart products, which are deployed on top of the rig operating system, which enables all of this process automation that I talked about in the both in the presentation as well as a few key things that I mentioned here. So what we observed was that we started deploying the technology sometime around 2019, and we started scaling up the next year to year and a half. And we looked at data from prior to deploying the first technology to when they went 100% rig operating system enabled process automation on. So looking back at that data, we saw a significant improvement in the footage drilled per day, which led to efficiency, which means you're spending more time on bottom and there is less non-productive time. So we saw about 28% increase in footage per day. And not just that, so with the customization that I talked about on top of the standard approach, is that now we follow best practices designed for the tools and for the location. So we were able to achieve a much better wellbore quality that reduced slide times and the number of slides you took. So that effectively meant you don't have to trip out unnecessary for changing out mud motor or any downhole tool failure. So we had 100% success in having a single run lateral that effectively led us to decreasing our time from spud to TD from 15 days to 11 days. It was a very successful deployment over the first year and a half on the Bakken in all of Nabors rigs, and we've been able to reproduce the same success both in the lower 48 in the US as well as globally, most recently in the Middle East.
And lastly, your presentation was on autonomous drilling, and I have to ask, how close are we to seeing autonomous drilling at scale? I mean, I know Nabors has the news about the Pace R801, the first autonomous land rig that you guys had last year, but that's one rig. So how close are we to having this at scale where we can see this everywhere?
Yeah, great question. So capital is definitely a big issue when it comes to building new rigs. So one of the things the rig operating system ensures is that it's modular and it's scalable. So we are in the process of deploying a retrofittable solution on the existing rig fleet. So we can reuse some of the technologies that we used on the R801, which was deployed last year, remodel some of the robotic solutions and retrofit it on our existing rig fleet, which gets us as close to possible as full automation.
Well, Ram, thank you so much for giving us so much of this insight on some of the cool stuff that Nabors is working on. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the company kind of progresses with developing automation at scale. And I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of people out there that are going to be wondering what you guys are going to be doing next. So thanks again.
Thank you, Stephen, for having me. I'm pretty excited about what the journey looks ahead for Nabors as well as the industry.
And thank you for visiting Drilling Contractor.